Well, hey everybody, I'm John Ritlin, back with the second part of every WCW Tag Team Champion ranked from worst to best. If you haven't seen the first part, link is up here, or if I forget to put it up there, please check the channel timeline as it will be there. I'm recording these in about like a 3 or 4 hour block, just over the course of a few hours, so these will be up in due course. And this is a way just to fill, the gaps in the schedule and stuff like that. And also, you guys tend to enjoy the ranking videos, and that really means a lot. And thank you for also enjoying the content that myself and the Durbinator do. Fellow wrestling fan to all their fellow wrestling fans, it means a lot. Your support for the channel is truly awesome. Just for a channel that I just normally produce on my phone, or that myself and Durbinator produce at his house, it's just a lot of fun, and thank you guys for making it even more fun with your comments, your sharing of the videos, and all that. I just try to take a moment to thank you guys during some of the videos because it really means a lot to me. I also want to make mention, every WWE, WCW, Cruiserweight and Light Heavyweight Championship list. That will be up at some point. That will probably be done sometime, I would say, in September, unless I get some time, like, next week. So we will see what happens. Otherwise, look out for that, and look out for more content as it keeps happening. So, 55 entrants. One honorable mention, though. Hey, remember when they did the whole thing with, Rick Steiner and Judy Bagwell? And the Scott Steiner, Buff Bagwell feud and that kind of stuff. Remember that? Remember the tag team war over that? Remember the tag team, the tag team titles and that kind of remember that bullshit? Remember that? Yeah, that's getting an honorable mention because it was absolute goddamn dog shit. Judy Bagwell should have never been featured on WCW TV. It was just absolutely fucking rubbish. So that's where I'm mentioning that right here. It was just so fucking bad. Like, why on earth did this fucking happen? Why? Why did this happen? It was goddamn stupid. So, we go to number 55. The Filthy Animals. Juventud Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. 35 days, 1 reign. This is when they were both unmasked. And, the Filthy Animals, this was also, they were former members of the LWO, the Latino World Order. They probably would have gone on longer had Eddie Guerrero's car accident not happened. Thankfully, he came back from it. But boy, that was scary. I wondered what happened at the time, even though the internet was still around. It was like, oh, I found out like months or, a couple weeks later, like, oh, God, I hope Eddie's okay. And he came back way too soon. But anyway, Juvi and Ray were a really, really good team. They didn't last very long. I always thought they were better rivals than they were as a team, but they worked well here, and it was a good, it was a good pairing. They had them for just over a month. It was nice to see the Cruiserweights getting some tag team, some tag team supremacy here. And no, I'm also not ranking the Cruiserweight Tag Team Champions on this list. Even though I could, those tag titles did not last very long. There were a few champions. They aren't really worth mentioning. I'm sorry, it's not that the Cruiserweights don't matter, but I'm not mentioning them here on this list. So yeah, Filthy Animals, Juvi and Ray get a mention at number 55. Number 54, Brothers of Destruction. Kane Undertaker, 1 reign, 49 days. Yes, these guys were tag team champions, and this was during the time when you had... It's such great feuds like against DDP and Canyon where DDP got absolutely just freaking destroyed in the steel cage at SummerSlam 01. Oh, and then the Brothers of Destruction faced off against Chronic at Unforgiven 2001. That was a match that actually happened, and it was absolutely atrocious. Absolutely goddamn atrocious. I could not believe how bad that was. Still, Kane Undertaker, sometimes rivals, sometimes tag team champions, sometimes rivals again. They never knew what the fuck to really do with them. It was weird booking. But they were tag team champions a whole lot longer than you would have thought, even with these two big titans. It's still, I don't know, it had, I guess, a little credibility to tag titles, but by that point, they had pretty much torpedoed the whole tag team, the WCW tag team division. Not Kane and Undertaker specifically, I just mean WWE Creative. Then we move on to number 53, Ray Stevens and Greg Valentine, 42 days, 1 reign. Okay, Greg Valentine's views on a lot of things, out of, like to the side. He was a good tag team champion. He was a good singles champion. Him and Ray Stevens, that's a pairing that you could get behind. You could watch. I don't know how much footage of this actually exists, but based just solely on studying this a little bit, sure, they didn't hold it for too long. It was about a month and a half, just under a month and a half. Still, those two guys as tag team champions, that's a lot of credibility that you're lending to a championship. So it deserves a mention here. 52. Arn Anderson and Paul Roma, 32 days, 1 reign. Paul Roma should have never been in the Four Horsemen. I'm not knocking Paul Roma. I'm not. I think he was a very good tag team wrestler. Him and Arn were a very good team. Roma just never, they just put Roma in there and it never worked, and that's not even necessarily Roma's fault. It was just creative. But they were a good team. They were a good team. They didn't last very long as tag team champions, just over a month. But still, as an actual unit, as a unit in the ring, I'm going to keep saying the word unit until I stop laughing at it. It's hard to hard unit. It's see, I didn't succeed very well in like not laughing, about it. I was trying to internalize that. But the whole point is Arn and Paul Roma, very good team, underappreciated. Paul Roma, underappreciated tag team worker. Just didn't last very long. They should have put somebody else in the Four Horsemen. Should have brought, Roma in to team with others, because I'm actually going to make mention of another team that Paul Roma was part of a little bit later in this list. It was actually pretty good, but I'll get to that later. Number 51, the Varsity Club, 35 days, one reign. That was Mike Rotunda, Dr. Death, Steve Williams, and Kevin Sullivan. And also Rick Steiner was there too. You had a rotating cast of the Varsity Club and that kind of stuff, and then you had Rick Steiner feuding with Mike Rotunda after he got kicked out of the Varsity Club. They were pretty good. They were pretty good trio, duo, whichever incarnation you got, despite the fact Kevin Sullivan was there. You had Dr. Death, Steve Williams, and Mike Rotunda, prime Mike Rotunda, able to, carry the load while Sullivan was just there to be a brawling idiot. I never liked Kevin Sullivan, can you tell? Still, them as tag team champions, okay, cool. It was good. It worked. It really did work. And I know that Sullivan and Williams, I believe, also competed for the U.S. Tag Team Championships, which, yes, I may do at some point. I may do NWA Tag Champions and NWA US Tag Team Champions at some point. I just didn't want to include them here because I thought I should just focus on the World Tag Team Championships from WCW. Though there were some good teams that held the US tag titles. Midnight Express and others and stuff like that. Fantastics. There were some really good teams that held that. Now, move on to number 50. Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan, 56 days, one reign. I actually recently watched Bash at the Beach 94 when they competed and lost the tag titles. I believe they're Pretty Wonderful, Roma and Orndorff. And they were a pretty good team. And I'll mention them here in a little bit. But Sullivan and Jack, no. Cactus Jack, much better on his own. I mean, yes, the brawling style worked well together with them. I just didn't think it was good. I just didn't like them as a team. The only reason I'm ranking them up here is because 56 days, almost 2 months, had to rank them up there because I can't let my bias get in the way that much. They were a pretty good team. So I have to rank them there, and I have to put my biases aside just a little bit. I still don't like them as a team. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Number 49, the Insiders, 36 days, 2 reigns. That was Kevin Nash and DDP. And I actually thought they were a pretty good team. This was in later WCW when the company had totally spiraled out of control and the titles meant nothing. World title, tag title, cruiserweight, whatever. None of the titles meant anything. Anything at all. That being said, Nash and DDP worked pretty well as a team. I mean, sure, the average reign was 18 days between the two reigns, but still, pretty goddamn good team. And, I mean, they deserve a mention on here. Number 48. Kidman and Ray. 41 days, 1 reign. Billy Kidman and Rey Mysterio were a damn good team. They were a goddamn good team. They were a good team in 99, 2000, 2001. They were a really, really, really good team. I really thought they complemented each other very well. Unmasked Ray and Kidman, peak Kidman, working well together. Hard to beat that. Sure, not a long reign, but still, over a month. That's more than some of the reigns I mentioned on here. And then we go to number 47, Mr. Wrestling and Dino Bravo, 54 days, 1 reign. Dino Bravo, pre-WWE, is a bit of a sight to see. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, because actually Dino Bravo, before he just bulked up and roided out of his goddamn mind, and he did, sorry, he wasn't the only one, but he did. Interesting to see Dino Bravo before he, got, blown up with garden hose, or, blown up with, like, an air hose and air pump and stuff like that. But Mr. Wrestling, that was a gimmick that worked well in the 70s and 80s and that kind of stuff. And him and Dino Bravo, it's a good pairing. I mean, 54 days. I mean, I don't know that much footage that exists of them, but hey, I got to give a mention to them. And then we go to 46. Ivan and Nikita Koloff, 46 days, 1 reign. This is not the reign that they had where Crusher Khrushchev, Barry Darsow, was involved. This was a little bit later. And Ivan and Nikita, I believe this is when they were having their feud with the Road Warriors. And I liked Ivan and Nikita. I thought they were good. I thought they were a good pairing. I think Ivan lent a lot of credibility and and veteran leadership to this teaming with Nikita, who was still very, very young in the business at this time. And sure, 46 days. They didn't have them very long, but they were feared and hated Russian heels. And it was a way to get a babyface team over. So at least that happened. And also, I believe that, I think this might have been when they were feuding with the Rock and Roll Express, because Rock and Roll Express beat them in a cage match. And I believe Starrcade 85, which, that's a pretty goddamn good cage match you should go and check out. Rock and Roll Express will get mentioned later in this list. Maybe not this video, but another video. Number 45, Don Kernodle and Bob Orton Jr., 56 days, 1 reign. Don Kernodle, or Kernoodle, or Snickerdoodle, as some people might have said. I don't know why. He was a good tag team wrestler. Him and Orton Jr., him and Slaughter, they were a really good team. Some footage exists of the guy. I would recommend you go check that stuff out, especially him teaming with Sergeant Slaughter, as they were pretty good. But him and Bob Orton Jr., that's not a bad pairing at all. And 56 days, holding it for almost 2 months, that's something worth mentioning at least. Even if I don't have a ton of knowledge of it, hey, it's worth mentioning. Then we get to 44, Chronic, 50 days, 2 reigns. Oh dear. Brian Clark and Brian Adams, no, not that one. Not the singer. Boy, this was, oh God. Sweet fucking Christ, Chronic. And I mean, I think somebody was on a whole lot of Chronic or something when this team was put together, which is scary because Clark and Adams should have been able to work really well together because they were 2 powerhouse guys. They've been around for a number of years. Not necessarily used all that great. Clark less so because he was Adam Bomb and then he was Wrath. And then he was paired with Brian Adams. Again, not that one here. But they, 2 reigns, I mean, they didn't last very long. It was like 25 days. And then they had that famous match against Kane and The Undertaker at Unforgiven 01. Oh boy. If you haven't seen that match at Unforgiven 2001, please check that out. Chronic versus Brothers of Destruction. You will see what I mean. The match is bad. It's really, really bad. But yeah, in their WCW days, they were at least featured. I will say that much, but they weren't really pushed all that well. Plus, again, the tag team titles didn't really mean anything by that point. Now we get to 43, Stars and Stripes, 50 days, 2 reigns. This is the Patriot and Buff Bagwell. Buff Bagwell, I think this is the highest he's going to get on this list. I wrote down a whole lot of these, so forgive me if I forget. They were a pretty good team. Patriot is somebody I think people tend to forget that he was actually a pretty good worker. I don't know if he was as great as everybody felt that he was, or that some people felt he was, but hey, the guy was pretty goddamn over and was really committed to his gimmick, so credit for that. But him and Bagwell, they were, they were an interesting team. This is when they were still doing Bagwell's underneath babyface and working in tag teams and stuff like that, like his time with Too Cold Scorpio and everything. So, yeah, it was a weird era for Bagwell, especially seeing how he would become a cocky heel a little bit later. But him and Patriot worked well together in 2 reigns. Okay, I mean, again, it's the same as Chronic, but at least Patriot and Bagwell worked, at least sold for the right people. Chronic didn't so much, in that match that I mentioned before. This was a good team that wasn't going to ever hold the titles for that long, but still, at least it worked. And then we get to the Mamalukes. It's 70 days over 2 reigns. It's Big Vito, Johnny the Bull Stamboli, and Tony Marinara because, New York stereotypes. Look, I hated this. I hated this stable. I didn't hate the talent. Well, Marinara, I didn't really care about him. Nothing against the guy. I just didn't really care. But Vito and, Johnny the Bull deserved so much better, I thought. But this just wasn't, this wasn't very good. If I remember right, I think they even had Disco Inferno kind of as a babyface competing against these guys. And it was fucking terrible. It was absolutely fucking terrible. I think it was Sold Out 2000, if I remember right. Which, boy, you want to talk about a downfall. Look at how the crowds were reacting to Starrcade 98, and then look at Sold Out 99. But even then, look at like other pay-per-views later in the year. Then you get to Fall Brawl 99. By 4 months later, good God, the crowds just didn't give a shit at all. Because they didn't know what the fuck was going on anymore. But, yeah, the Mamalukes, not really much of anything. Sorry. I mean, it was a Russo creation. I mean, what the fuck else you want me to say? They're ranked this high because 70 days. I mean, I got to give a little bit of respect there, but that's about it. We then get to number 41, Kenny Chaos and Rick Steiner, 70 days, 1 reign. And if I remember right, I think this was born out of the fact that they weren't going to have Judy Bagwell be a tag team champion, so they had Kenny Chaos, who is a member of High Voltage. They tried to give a singles push to, and I mean, I remember liking High Voltage when I was a kid, but it was a really stupid gimmick. The guys weren't that bad. They were two powerhouse guys that I thought moved around the ring decently well. But yeah, Kenny Chaos and Rick Steiner, very odd pairing. They really used Rick Steiner weirdly after splitting from Scott Steiner. It worked to an extent. I mean, I guess people sort of remember him, Kenny Chaos, but do they remember this pairing for the right reasons? Oh, well, is what it is. Certainly not the best team. Certainly not the worst team, though. And then we get to number 40. Mark Jindrak and Sean O'Haire. 52 days, 2 reigns. I believe they were the perfect event here. No. No, they weren't the perfect event. That was another team. Sorry, some of these names kind of blend together. Jindrak and O'Haire were actually a good pairing. It wasn't the best pairing that O'Haire was in, and I'll get to that here later. But still, I thought that, for the fact that they were just literally brought up and just like thrown on TV, they got over pretty well, and they were a pretty good team. Because WCW is just bringing up a whole bunch of guys from the power plant, just like, hey, we're going to replenish our roster with a whole bunch of guys that nobody's ever heard of, except a few fans. That's nothing against Jindrak and O'Haire. But just nobody really knew who the hell these guys were, and they had to plug these guys in and get them over after the veterans and everything, after this whole talent shift went awry. That kind of stunted the growth of a lot of teams. Still, they weren't a bad team. I mean, yeah, sure, average of 26 days over, between the two reigns. Okay, cool. 26 days each reign. I think one was more than the other, but still, good team, was what it was. And then we get to number 39, Bunkhouse Buck and Dick Slater, 57 days, 1 reign. I mean, it's Bunkhouse Buck and Dick Slater. It was when Buck was like about out of the business at this point. Dick Slater still had a couple years left until he got injured. When he was teaming with Mike Enos, I think they were rough and ready and stuff like that. And I mean the name of the team. I mean, whatever. I don't really care what anybody does, but I didn't mean to imply any of that about anybody if it isn't true. They were a good team. It was still a southern regional, type gimmick, but still, almost 2 months, 1 reign, cool. Number 38, Midnight Express, Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton, 49 days, 1 reign. Yes, I hate that I put Lane and Eaton this low, but I can't just put my favorite teams way, way up if the figures aren't there. And I love Lane and Eaton. They were short-term NWA World Tag Team Champions. I believe this was after they had beaten Arn and Tully when Arn and Tully left. The last night they were there in Crockett Promotions before going to WWE. They then lost to the Road Warriors like a month and a half later when Dusty tried to turn the Road Warriors heel, which that backfired horribly, didn't it? Oh boy. And then they were tag team champions for a while. I mean, the Road Warriors were. Lane and Eaton, they were U.S. tag champions and NWA World Tag Team Champions, then gave up the U.S. tag team titles at this time. It was a good idea, and it's a shame they didn't get to have them longer. But, hey, you can't take it away from them. They were NWA World Tag Team Champions, and they fucking deserved it. Now we move on to number 37, Dustin Rhodes and Barry Windham, 58 days, 1 reign. Good shit. Windham, I believe, got his hand injured at some point, and then Dustin ended up teaming up with another guy that I'm going to get to here in a little bit. But then Windham ended up turning heel and teaming up with Brian Pillman, which actually I thought Windham and Pillman were a much better team. And some people want to give them credit for, even though they weren't tag team champions, at least not according to this list. So, yeah, Dustin Rhodes and Barry Windham. And, I mean, Dustin was much more, on the ascent here. Barry had kind of plateaued and was going to start heading down here soon after this. But they were a good team. They were a really good team. 2 Southern guys that could really go at it in the ring with some great tag team wrestling experience. And Barry did help bring Dustin along. Even though Dustin had grown up in the business, as far as having his dad, Dusty Rhodes, obviously. I know Dustin Rhodes. It may shock you that his dad was Dusty, but still, I mean, I'm sorry to blow your mind right here. They were a good team, though. And then we get to number 36, Dustin Rhodes and Ricky Steamboat, 58 days. They were a good team. This is, if I'm right, I think Dustin might have been taken out sometime after this because, actually, this is back in 91. Because you had Dustin Rhodes reveal Ricky Steamboat as a tag team partner to take down Arn Anderson and Larry Zbyszko, who were the enforcers at the time. And that was a pretty monumental pop, actually. Ricky Steamboat got a really big pop. He went to WWE in earlier 91, wasn't really utilized all that well, and then left soon after, and then, and then came back and got a big pop. Because he was always more of a WCW guy. Even though he had one of the best matches in WWE history, at, WrestleMania 3, and I still, against Randy Savage, I still argue that's one of the best matches ever. He always felt more like a WCW guy. Like, Vince didn't really know what to do with him. It was nice that he got that little 2009 run to, like, pay homage to his career and everything and say, hey, he could still fucking go in the ring, but whatever. Dustin and Steamboat were a really good team, and I liked it. They didn't have titles long, just under 2 months, but still, it was good. Number 35, Perfect Event, Sean Stasiak and Chuck Palumbo, 59 days, 3 reigns. Okay, sure. Average just under 20 days between, each reign. Maybe not all that great, but at least they were pushing young talent, and Stasiak and Palumbo were pretty good. I think Palumbo was better teaming up with Billy Gunn as part of Billy and Chuck, but still, I digress. Palumbo was a pretty good tag team worker. Wasn't necessarily a singles guy, but a pretty good tag team worker. And this was, again, when they were throwing out a whole bunch of guys, young guys to try and get everybody over and do some good stuff. So, well done. It was well played. We then get to the Jersey Triad. 72 days, 2 reigns. Jersey Triad was Bam Bam Bigelow, DDP, and Chris Kanyon, or Kanyon. Positively Kanyon is what he would become later. After they threw him off of the second, or, one of the cages for the 3-tiered, War Games match in the same venue where Owen Hart had died just about a year before. Tactful. That's great. I don't know who fucking came up with that idea, but whoever came up with that idea was a fucking idiot. And one, it was terrible. They were also trying to replicate Mankind, the Mankind fall off the cell, and Kanyon went through part of the ramp, which I'm sure felt so great. I think Kanyon fucked up his back, which I wouldn't be surprised, because fucking hell, taking that kind of bump's ridiculous. And again, in the same venue where Owen Hart had died about a year before. That's not to say WWE hasn't done tasteless shit since. And WCW did plenty of tasteless shit, but maybe it wasn't the best idea. I'm all for edginess in wrestling, but oh boy, that always bothered me. But anyway, that was before that. The Jersey Triad was before that. I always thought Bam Bam Bigelow, DDP, and Kanyon were a really phenomenal trio. They worked well together. And it was nice to see DDP still featured in a title picture after being transitioned out of being WCW champion until 2000. And then David Arquette became champion. That's nothing against David Arquette, everything against the people behind it. But this was good stuff. 36 days, on average for the reigns. Good stuff. I enjoyed the Jersey Triad as tag team champions. And then we get to the Giant and Scott Hall at number 33. 98 days, 1 reign after that whole thing that I mentioned in the previous video, which again, the link should be up there, where Giant and Sting fought for control of the tag titles, and then Sting won, and Nash and Sting were tag team champions for 35 days, and then Giant and Scott Hall became tag team champions. And if I'm right, they ended up just hot potatoing the titles off of them soon afterwards. Let's see, because that would have been, July, so this would have been around, late October, early November that they did that. I think it would have been about early November, and that's when things were really going down, badly for Scott Hall. I think it's where he was U.S. champion, he was TV champion, and he threw a TV title in the trash. Good idea. Maybe that was 99. I don't necessarily remember. I think it might have been 99. A lot of years tend to blend together for me in WCW. Giant and Scott Hall were a good team because they did work well together. It's just a shame that Scott Hall's demons had taken a hold of him at this point. Now, he's cleaned up since, seemingly, and that's good. But boy, it was sad to see Scott Hall like this. Still, they were a good team, and they held the titles for about 3 months. Just over. Number 32, Terry Bam Bam Gordy and Dr. Death Steve Williams. 78 days, 1 reign. Great rivals in All Japan, great teammates in All Japan, great rivals in WCW, great rivals in other companies. And they were a great team in WCW here. Gordy and Williams were absolutely phenomenal. It's a shame they didn't get to hold the titles for a really long time. But Terry Gordy and Dr. Death Steve Williams also had their All Japan commitments, which were paying him a ton of money. Giant Baba loved big guys that could move really well, and Terry Bam Bam Gordy and Dr. Death Steve Williams were 2 guys that he could absolutely push, and the Japanese fans loved them. I mean, how could you not? How could you not love 2 legit athletes like that? But yeah, they were tag team champions for just under 80 days. It worked well, good, cool. And then we get to number 31, the Enforcers, which were Larry Zbyszko and Arn Anderson, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in this list. 75 days, 1 reign, and then they lost them to Steamboat and Dustin Rhodes when Steamboat made his triumphant return. Zbyszko and Arn are often forgotten about as a pretty good pairing. This is when Zbyszko He was I think, well, he wasn't still the AWA champion because AWA ceased operations earlier in 91, but he was the last AWA champion. He had come back to WCW because he needed a job, so did a lot of other people, which, I mean, can you blame him? Once the company shuts down, other people got to look for jobs. Zbyszko and Arn, when they were teamed up together and then they became part of the Dangerous Alliance a little bit later, they are a forgotten pairing that I thought really worked well together. And I guess Arn had more left in the tank. Zbyszko didn't necessarily wrestle a bunch after this outside of, like, some matches then was used sparingly and then went to, like, semi-retirement and would come back here and there. And then had that awful match against Eric Young at Bound for Glory 2006. But I digress on that. They were a really, really good pairing. I liked them here. And the fact that they got to be part of that, be part of that match where Ricky Steamboat got the huge pop upon his return. They were also a really good team. They just really were. Number 30, Pretty Wonderful. Pretty Paul Roma and Paul Orndorff. I almost said Paul Ellering. Roma and Ellering would have been interesting, but that didn't happen. Orndorff and Roma, they were really good. One reign, 94 days. They had beaten Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan for the titles, as I mentioned earlier in the list, and then lost to I can't remember who the fuck they lost him to. They lost him to the Nasty Boy? No, Stars and Stripes, maybe. I think they lost him to the Nasty Boys. I think they did. Yeah, that's when, like, soon after, I think it was like a number of months later, I think it was like Super Brawl 95, I think was the last match that Roma was, part of in WCW and then was released from his contract. But Pretty Wonderful was a pretty good team. And no, that's not pun intended. They actually were. Roma and Orndorff worked well together. Roma is somebody who was a veteran but was still a young guy, and Orndorff, his reputation speaks for itself, that is. They were a pretty good team, and they worked well together here, so I got to mention him here on this list. Number 29, Manny Fernandez and Rick Rude, 150 days, one reign. Now we're getting to where the reigns really get high in numbers. Manny Fernandez, nuts. I don't know if all the stories he said were true, like as far as like stuff that he did in his career, but whatever. Hey, he was entertaining, he was super over and everything. And Rick Rude, this was before Rick Rude went to WWE. I believe this was here. I believe this was after he had left World Class and then had gone to Crockett, and then he went to WWE. Timeline of events is still a little bit off, but still, 150 days as champions over just one reign. It's pretty goddamn good. I mean, it's 5.5 months, no, 5 months. Still, that's really good. And Manny, Manny could bring Rick along and stuff like that. And Rick, was a natural pretty much from, like, I'd say about a year on until his unfortunate back injury, and then he couldn't get back in the ring. The whole Lloyd's of London insurance policy thing. Oh boy. So, number 20, if you don't know about that, Google Rick Rude, Lloyd's of London insurance policy, and you'll see what I mean. But Paul Jones and Masked Superstar, 127 days over 2 reigns. Well, Paul Jones gets another mention here. Still super over in the Carolinas, Masked Superstar. They like the mask shit. Kind of like the whole Mr. Wrestling stuff. It worked well. They did some good stuff, and it's hard really not to mention, Paul Jones when you talk about the Crockett territory. So there we go. Now we move on to number 26, Jimmy Snuka and Paul Orndorff, 148 days, 1 reign. Hard not to mention these guys, even though Jimmy Snuka never faced a day in jail for murdering his girlfriend Nancy Argentino. Paul Orndorff, had to mention him here. This was when Snuka was really goddamn over before I guess the drugs really took a hold of him. But he was pretty goddamn over, and him and Orndorff were a pretty damn good team. Not sure how much footage exists of them on YouTube, but check them out. You'll see what I mean. Now we mentioned Jimmy Snuka again to round off the rest of this. It's Jimmy Snuka and Ray Stevens, 158 days, 1 reign. Again, Ray Stevens, tag team specialist. Jimmy Snuka gets another mention here. Snuka, a lot of people forget about his career outside of WWE, or at least pre-WWE. Pretty goddamn over as a talent. Again, a murderer that never faced true justice. Still, got to mention, just as far as wrestling accolades, he does get a mention here. And, of course, got to mention Ray Stevens, again, as great as he was as a tag team wrestler. That's where I'm going to finish this up. I still got 25 more to go in the next video. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.